One must overcome his lust to realize his true self. He must conquer his animal instincts and not be an impulsive creature destined to a failure late in life. He must recognize the greatness of his sexual energy, the sacredness of his seed, and instead of wasting it on fruitless acts, he should cultivate, harness, and channel his sexual energy towards realizing higher goals and aspirations. The act of sexual transmutation should be his instrument of success. His lion is to be tamed. Otherwise, he will live a life devoid of greatness, devoid of any urge of self-mastery. He will be doomed to lifelong suffering, despair, mediocrity, and regret. He will rot for the remainder of his life and will be swallowed into infinite decay. So a man must rise and conquer his animal instincts, but the path to lust conquest is perilous and requires nuanced endurance. In my journey, I've seen a key element that's often overlooked that inevitably leads to failure. The awareness of this aspect, I feel, is crucial in NoFap. Let's elaborate. We must understand the whole process, the entire series of events that lead to the failure of masturbation. We must realize that there are overlooked processes that take place prior to what is usually recognized as the cause of the relapse. Initially, one would make the mistake of thinking that breaking and masturbating is the result of a one bad day where you were in a particularly weak state of mind and were overwhelmed by a particularly strong temptation. You were almost ambushed by a strong rush of lust, blinding your reasoning, and the next thing you know, you messed up. This is not true. The failure cannot be caused by a single instance of temptation because there exists a buffer preventing an immediate failure. This buffer is what's called your willpower, a certain amount of mental endurance and resolve you have against the temptations, a barrier of discipline to combat the withdrawal symptoms. So it's clear that there's a certain amount of willpower you have, and it's not a black and white state, but more of a meter that is consumed over the course of many instances. So the final instance that runs out the meter and results in a relapse is not necessarily the cause of the failure, but is the final straw that broke the camel's back. Because of this, to prevent future failures, one must understand the whole process and figure out the behavior that chips away at his willpower. The culprit is not a single instance of lust, but an accumulation, a buildup of temptations slowly deteriorating your discipline. That's the cause. So not being able to resist the urges and finally breaking is the result of a certain buildup of arousal, leading us to the conclusion that your biggest enemy and the most probable cause of failure will be accumulation of arousal. The obvious question is, what exactly causes arousal? Certainly, a mere sight of a lustful material does not cause arousal, because at the beginning, that lustful material is recognized, yet not allowed to fulfill its function of arousing you, which is something we don't want, because arousal weakens your willpower. You only allow it to arouse you and deteriorate your willpower after you start to intentionally pay attention to that lustful material. That's the key point: willful indulgence of lust. Recognizing it as an arousing material and a threat to your success, yet continuing to pay attention to it, effectively allowing it to weaken your willpower. Under the light of this information, the whole process is revealed. Willful indulgence of lust, of sexual materials and thoughts, leads to arousal. Arousal starts to deteriorate your willpower, and the deterioration of willpower accumulates and reaches a critical mass, at which point you can no longer endure the temptations and end up failing. So it is absolutely imperative that you understand the whole process and not lock yourself into a narrow understanding. You must see the whole process from beginning to end, know every aspect of the abstinence. Overlooking this critical aspect of arousal and what causes it, which is willfully indulging in lustful materials and thoughts, will lead to perpetual failure. Because how can you forbid yourself to do one thing while allowing yourself to do another thing that leads to it? You can't forbid yourself to masturbate while allowing yourself to indulge in lust, which leads to the accumulation of arousal, which then leads to masturbation. After a certain buildup of arousal, you will not be able to endure the urges, and failure will be inevitable. This leads us to the conclusion that rejecting the indulgence of lust is just as important as rejecting masturbation itself. It is essential that you see lustful materials and thoughts as direct threats, and the willful indulgence in those lustful materials and thoughts as mini failures that accumulate into the full failure of masturbation. like little cracks slowly forming in a vase that, if left untreated, shattering the entire thing, those seemingly innocent and harmless little indulgences build up and lead to relapse. For example, in yogic science, it is said that semen exists in a subtle form throughout the body and is withdrawn and elaborated into gross form in the sexual organ under the influence of the sexual will and excitement. These ancient sciences put emphasis on the downward movement of your sexual energy. So it's not just the act of masturbation or recreational sex that directs the energy downwards, but it is also said that even having lustful thoughts decrease your vitality and flows the energy downwards. Proper way is the upwards movement of your sexual energy by practicing sexual transmutation, by not spilling your seed for an invalid reason, and instead focusing your energy to achieve higher goals and projects. Same thing with chakras. Instead of having your life energy descend to your root chakra to be converted into sexual energy, it should ascend up through the chakras for higher purposes. We should only indulge in sexual acts when the context is right, and being hunched over in front of a computer, looking at a bunch of pixels on a monitor, and touching yourself like a dumb animal, all the while being brainwashed by the mind parasite of porn, is not the right context. The epitome of a failed man is an impulsive creature who will be stupefied at arousal, who will forget all his goals and aspirations when his lust is triggered, who will suspend all his principles for a mere touch sensation. When it comes to overcoming your lust and addiction, you must by all means reject willfully paying attention to arousing materials and thoughts. Whatever it might be, a picture, a video, a part of a video, certain websites, certain areas of certain websites, fantasies of a hypothetical or a past experience, etc. should all be avoided. In this hypersexualized world we're living in, sexual signals are everywhere. The media, the internet, the people. Wherever you go, you will encounter something arousing. But this is okay, because growth cannot be achieved without hardship. And ultimately, lust is in the mind and not in the environment. So here's what to do. Once you encounter something lustful, something that if willfully indulged in would lead to arousal, recognize that it's a lustful material and ignore it. Don't indulge in it. Don't watch that video or just skip that part. Don't look at those pictures. Don't go to that website. Don't continue to think about it. Simply move on without allowing it to arouse you. That way you would protect your willpower, because it is the willful indulgence in a lustful material that causes arousal, and not an encounter that you shut down once you recognize its danger. So these are all mini wars that you mustn't lose, and it's very important to not have a narrow perspective on this. It's about the all-encompassing concept of lust and not its subcategories like masturbation, porn, or anything else. You can't hope to succeed if you're focusing on some aspects of lust but ignoring the rest. You should renounce every thought and behavior pattern that's connected to lust. It's all or nothing. Anything else would be lopsided thinking, and their results will mirror that exploitative behavior. All in all, it's about continuous, unwavering, focused, and intelligent discipline that doesn't allow any compromise. No doubt, as you're enduring your addiction, slowly but surely rewiring your brain to a healthy state, you're facing grave challenges in the form of withdrawal symptoms. Your brain that has been trained and conditioned into expecting so many sexual signals is now denied of those signals, and because of this, it's constantly urging you to satiate its wants, which you can't. Due to the cunning nature of your addiction, it will employ many tactics to reinstate itself, to get you to fail. You need to be aware of these tactics and be ready to debunk and shut them down once they occur. There's a problem relevant to our topic here, and that's the thought of, I'll just look at a couple of stuff, but I won't touch myself. It'll take the edge off, I'll just watch, that's all. This is a very dangerous thing to do, and it won't take the edge off at all. It'll make it much worse. Because looking at arousing materials in a mistaken attempt to make things easier would be willfully indulging in lust, which will cause arousal, and that's a recipe for eventual failure. You might not fail today, maybe tomorrow won't be the final twist of the knife, not even the day after perhaps, but eventually your willpower will be too weakened to continue, and you will fail. It'll make things significantly harder, and you won't hold out for much longer. Recognize that it's a trap, a conniving tactic from the addiction to reinstate itself, and not give in. Stay clear of anything lustful, and allow your brain and body to fix themselves. In closing, I would suggest writing something, a manifesto of sorts, for when you feel weak and tempted, to remind you of your mission. In it, you can write about what's going to happen if you fail, what's going to happen if you continue, why you should continue, and its essentiality in your success, so that you can transcend your current predicament and not give in to the temptations. This concludes my video. I hope it was helpful in realizing an often overlooked and dangerous behavior of willful indulgence of lust. Good luck in your conquest. Go forth and step out of darkness into the light.